Welcome back, scientists. This is Mr. Steier, and today we are talking about the Southwest Desert. Your goal today is you are going to be able to identify some of the living things in the Sonoran Desert, and you are going to be able to describe how the amount of rainfall affects the types of living things found in deserts of the Southwestern United States. If you remember back, we've been talking a lot about rainfall, and in our last lesson, we were talking about the animals and plants that live in the Pacific Northwest forests. And remember, the things that were living there were like those evergreen trees, those spruce and fir, those Douglas fir trees, wildflowers, mosses, ferns, all kinds of different tall, large plants and trees. And then we found different types of birds and insects, amphibians, mammals. There was a lot of different species and a lot of diversity of life in the Northwest forest, all based on the amount of rainfall that was happening there. Well, today, if we're talking about a desert, do you think those same animals and plants are going to live in the desert? Yeah, you're absolutely right. They are not. Like, you realize that because of the difference in the amounts of rainfall in the two regions, many of the living things in the northwestern forests could not survive in the desert. So here in front of us, we see this image of the Southwest Desert. Cacti such as the tall forked saguaro grow in the Sonoran Desert. So we can see that they're these saguaro cactuses, they're very spread out. They're not really near each other. We have some very low-lying cacti here. And there's a lot of space and some sagebrush growing, some small bushy plants growing in between all of these taller cactuses. And that is all because what happens here is there's not as much rain. And we're going to have to think critically, why is this so different? And why are these plants and animals that live here, how have they adapted in order to survive in this type of an environment? So as we go forward with this reading today, your goal is you're going to listen and to describe how the limited amount of rainfall in the southwestern United States affects the types of organisms that live in that region.
Southwest Desert. The Sonoran Desert in the southwestern United States looks very different from that of the Pacific Northwest. Why? This region receives very little rain. Plants that can survive with little water live in this dry region. Desert plants grow farther apart from each other than those in a forest. The animals that live in the desert must also be able to survive in harsh conditions without much water.
So how much rain falls in the southwestern desert? Well, if we remember back to our map and our graphic, the southwestern desert receives less than 30 centimeters or about 12 inches of water per year. And how does that compare with the amount of rainfall in the Pacific Northwest? Well, there's much more rainfall in the northwestern forests. Remember, some of those areas receive more than 250 centimeters or 100 inches of rain each year. So we're talking about 100 inches of rain in those forests we were looking at in the Pacific Northwest in our last lesson. And in this lesson, we're looking at 12 inches only in the Southwest Desert. So how does this impact the types of plants and animals that can grow and survive here? Well, we can see that we're going to have a lot of different animal species that are surviving. So the tough, scaly skin of reptiles, such as this iguana, slows the loss of water from their bodies. This allows them to survive in the desert. So because of their skin and they're able to slow the loss of water, they have a much more successful way to live in this dry, arid desert. And the saguaro cactus provides shelter around the nest of these Harris hawks. So they can find a habitat and a safe place in which to live so they can survive in this environment. Plants that live in the deserts must have ways to save water. The barrel cactus stores water in its thick stem. So what happens there is the water is sucked up from the ground and it's stored like a barrel or like a water bottle. Some plants, such as this purple mat, survive the dry weather as seeds. When there is enough rain, these plants quickly sprout, grow, flower, and set seeds. So because they know there's going to be a limited amount of water, they are able to quickly drop, sprout, get what they need, grow a new set of flowers, and seed again so that the plant can continue to survive. Some plants grow far apart so they don't have to compete as much for water. Some plants are able to survive because they store water in their stems, and some bloom and grow only after it rains. There's many different ways in which plants are able to survive in a desert. Let's think about this. Do you think the roots of most desert plants are close to the surface, or do they grow deep into the ground? Close to the surface or deep into the ground? Where do you think those roots are? So I really like some of your thinking there. You probably said that the roots on the most desert plants, they grow shallow. They're close to the surface. And shallow roots would be able to quickly absorb the little rain that falls into the dry ground. It's not going to go deep into the ground. It's going to get absorbed right away so that plant can get what it needs to grow and to survive. Now, as you work forward in this lesson, again, you are going to be identifying some of the living things in the Sonoran Desert, and you are going to be describing how the amount of rainfall affects the types of living things found in the deserts of the Southwestern United States. You might be surprised if you do some research what animals can actually grow and survive in the desert. There's a much more diversity than you may at first think. And all of these animals and all of these plants have found a unique way to adapt to their surroundings. And if you think about it, it's kind of like this. When you put a drop of water on a paper towel, it's absorbed. When you put a drop of water on a piece of plastic, it just sits on top. It does not go through. So when you think about it, which material is more like the skin of a reptile or the stem of a cactus? Well, the plastic wrap is a lot more like the skin of a reptile or the cactus. It's going to keep that water on the outside. It's going to hold it there so that it doesn't just get absorbed in and disappear. Be a critical thinker as you work your way through this lesson. You're going to have to do some inferencing about, could there be amphibians that live in the Southwest Desert? And if there are amphibians, how would they be able to survive? You're going to need to explain what are the characteristics that animals need to help them to survive in this desert. And of course, it all goes back to how they are using the rainfall, as limited as it is. Be a thoughtful and an intelligent scientist. Write like a scientist. Ask questions like a scientist. think like a scientist, and we will be back here on the next one. Bye, scientists.